And any time that there's harm, anything that creates harm, anything that feeds harm and continues harm, which is in many different fields, it's even in the mental health field, needs to be looked at, needs to be acknowledged, and needs to be worked on.
I wanted to see what it would be like if I tackled this on my own. And started for me, I'm going to say it was incredibly triggering with reading the Bible. And that was a whole discussion that I had to do with a friend of mine. And she was like, these are the different Bibles. These are the problematic ones, and these are the open minded ones. And I got a whole lecture on that in a good way. And that kind of shifted my perspective a little bit. I was like, okay, so back then when I was a kid, what I read essentially, I don't know which version it is, so don't ask that question later, guys, was more of the extremist, really old school, Old Testament type of Bibles. And now, after all these years, there are apparently really open, inclusive ones. And I'm like, okay, interesting. Let me check it out and make up my own mind. And so for a while now, I've been reading the Bible, and it's actually really it's actually really miraculous, because the things I've heard, the things I read, and the things I experience they have been life-changing thus far. And before I continue, I will say this. Not everybody will be able to heal from the things that have traumatized them. I don't know if I will be ever completely healed personally. I will say right now, I'm doing great strides in that. I'm in a lot of a better headspace than I used to be. I have no resentment or hate towards Christian or Christian beliefs or anything like that. There are still boundaries for me within that culture and that belief system, but for the most part, I'm good. And the reason for that being because, and I've heard a lot of people say this on TikTok as well, it's like there are people who run around saying they're Christian, and then there's the Bible, and they're completely different. So I've read certain books, I haven't read the whole thing, but the thing that has stood out for me is that the thing that gets constantly preached is love people the way that you want to be loved. Love your neighbor. That's the number one command that's given. The second is take care of the most vulnerable people in your community. The third is have respect for people even if they don't believe in the same things you do. And these are all things, by the way, can I just say that Jesus himself allegedly said. So I read those parts. I'm like, excuse me. I literally said, I had to look at the book. I said this to Ashley before we recorded this podcast. It was like I was going to write down several verses just so to fact check for anybody out there who thinks I'm pulling this out of a hat. But I'm not going to do that, because if you want to read the Bible, go ahead and read it. So, but the thing is, when I read that, it kind of completely changed my perspective on things, because obviously there's still things I disagree with. LGBTQIA people are love is love. I will forever stand on that. I will forever stand up for women's rights. That's something that I will stand on that hill, and I will die on that hill, because people are people, love is love. But the main thing I think that I've learned since then, because I'm reading currently the Gnostic Gospels, the Apocrypha, the Dead Sea Scrolls, all of these ancient texts, right? The thing I've learned is that these texts, especially in the Bible, have changed. They've been, what's the word that I'm looking for? Translated into patriarchal context. Whereas there were women that were not being represented the way they should have been. There were people not being represented the way they should have been. There were ancient Christian sections or sectors that practice their religions completely different than what they do today, including gay people and asexual people. So for me, having a bigger context now, let me say that again, having discovered historical context and having a little bit more background than just the projections that I've seen people project helped me a lot in my healing. And I feel truly now more than ever that if you are connected to love and you're connected to that frequency, that energy, all of that is pure. I feel like love is the purest thing on this world. I don't believe there's one way to reach that space or get in touch with whatever is higher than us. There are multiple different beliefs and cultures and the way that they practice their beliefs for a reason. And I think the thing that gets depicted and often misused and appropriated and used to control and manipulate is because people and often, okay, let me trace back. Let me say that again. Sorry. The thing that is taught that should be the way is love. You should love people. I think that is the thing that has been depicted by Jesus. If you believe in him and you believe he existed, that he taught. It's just love people, be kind, help each other out, don't be greedy, be there for each other, you know, stand on business when you need to, but that's essentially what he has always taught until the day he died. If you believe in the story, obviously there are people who don't, and that's completely fine. But to take that and to capitalize off of it, to try to manipulate people, this is the only way. You're going to go to hell if you do that. And I will say this, and you're gonna maybe flip some tables listening to this episode, but I'm gonna say it because I've been prepared to say this from day one. The way that a lot of people who consider themselves Christian today show up is, for me, more like Pharisees than it is what Christians actually were supposed to be. So Pharisees in the Bible, if you don't know, are people who hold themselves to high regard. They're like, we're perfect. We have our God. These are our practices. If you don't believe in this, you're an outcast. Get away. I don't know. I will not associate with you. You're below me. You're a prostitute. You're a beggar. Get away. Get out of my sight. I don't want to see you. You're making this space impure with your presence. That's what Pharisees are. And I feel like a lot of people who call themselves Christian today in the extremist spectrum, as well as with the judgment and the outcasting and not really participating in the very things that we're supposed to, which is love and taking care of each other and being there for each other, are Pharisees more so than what Christians were supposed to be. That's my opinion. You can take it or leave it. But I think a lot of churches today, I think a lot of religious organizations today are abusing people because it's money. It's about making money. It's about keeping your congregation, getting in as many people as you possibly can. And it reminded me of what you said, only being 2 weeks into that church, Ash, and then you were baptized. It takes a lot longer typically to know if you're in the right place, if you're comfortable. But when you have churches or institutions be like, oh, be part of this, be part of us, and then calling, where are you? Where are you? Why aren't you showing up? That's very problematic, manipulative, extortionist almost behavior. And it's not there for the safety of that person you're supposed to be helping or serving, because that's ultimately what it was supposed to be, right? You're supposed to serve people, your community, be there for people. And I think, like Ashley said, a lot of these youth pastors, youth leaders, they don't have the experience that's necessary. I think a lot of these people need to get psychology degrees. I think a lot of them need to learn how to deal with people in different crises. But in majority of these cases, and I still experience this today, if you don't fit a perfect narrative, you're discarded. And I think that's the worst thing possible that you can do if you preach yourself to be Christian. And then you have the narrative of, well, I'm not a perfect person. Like Jesus said this himself, I'm not perfect. I'm a sinner. So you should forgive me. Like Jesus forgave me. You should forgive me. Listen, I will spin this all back because, like we always say, it's all connected. Why is it that you're supposed to be perfect supposed to help people, be there, do this, do that, donate money to the church, look as a perfect Christian, have that mask on. But then when you are needing to be held accountable, all of a sudden you're not perfect anymore. You need to be forgiven for your actions. It doesn't work that way. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. You either have to be perfect or you have to be imperfect. And if you're willing to actually acknowledge that you're imperfect, then you also need to acknowledge when people call you out on your BS. You also need to stand accountable when people tell you that you've hurt them, or you need to take responsibility when you've manipulated, abused people. There's so much abuse going on in these institutions, in cults, and all of this stuff, and it's disgusting, and it doesn't get addressed. It just gets swiped under the table. Or when it gets addressed, it's in cases of like Jonestown, or one of these, like the alien one where the guy, the bald guy, ended the lives of like all of the people that went into his cult. Like, it's just, we see the horror stories, right? And you see, I will say, and I really am grateful for this, you have more Christians nowadays speak out about BS that's going on in the community. But I want to throw this in here real quick. All the Christians that are out there who were outraged at the Olympics this week, because we're recording this on the 2nd of August, where were you in the genocide of Palestine? Where was the outrage there? I would like to know, because allegedly that's Jesus's hometown. It's his people. They wrote the book there, the Bible. So where's the outrage? Where's the attack on Christianity there? No, it's only there when it's somehow gay people, trans people, Black people, women. It's like you pick and choose the narrative, the toxic Christians, I will say this, but it's the culture that we see. And you can argue, listen, you only see the negative Christians in the media. There are good Christians. I'm sure there are. But why is it that the negative Christians are not being addressed, are not being held accountable more, so that they're not the main people in focus when we talk about Christianity? Why are they running rampant? Why are they in the elections trying to take away people's rights, human beings' rights? That's not what being Christian is about. And I'm just wondering, in all of this, right? We're talking about attack on Christianity. We're talking about religious trauma. When is it going to end? Because the very people that are ruining your belief are the very people in your communities. It's not anybody outside of that. If you're talking about the devil, if you're talking about being possessed, the Antichrist, all of that, that is within the community. It's not outside of that. How can something outside of you infiltrate what is inside when the inside is healed? I would like to ask this question, like, I am so angry because I see these stories, I see people who have these terrible experiences in places where they're supposed to be loved and taken care of. Obviously, there are still good places. I'm not talking about them, but there are so many people that are getting abused, children that are getting abused, women that are getting suppressed. And it makes me furious. And you're seeing right now in live motion how people's rights are taken away left and right. And there are people out there who say that it's their religious freedom, the freedom to exist, that they can voice however they want to feel without any fear of the world of how it's affecting people around them. And I will tell you this now, the God that is out there, the Jesus that you believe in, I believe he existed, but this that's happening in the communities right now, especially in America, that has nothing to do with what was originally taught. Nothing, nowhere near. Because Jesus hung out with the prostitutes and the lepers, and that was at that time a very radical thing to do. With these Pharisees be like, oh, why are you not worshiping like I? And all my money, and I look so good. Like, I'm sorry, he hung out with the people that were rejected by society. And you're telling me that the people alive today that are calling themselves Christian, that are thinking that Jesus is a white man with blue eyes, probably, um, are taking people's faith away, and that's God? I'm sorry, no, it's not, and it will never be because it's not in the spirit of love. If you judge somebody, I've had this beautiful, beautiful video pop up from Dr. Wayne Dyer that I mentioned earlier, and he was like, you are not what other people project upon you. If you walk around and you say to somebody, you're stupid, that person is not stupid. However, you are a person who places judgment on others. So, to anybody out there who's like, well, I'm an imperfect person, I mess up. Yes, we all do. But to what extent? And do you think it's okay to not be held responsible if you do things like that, especially to the extreme levels of wanting to take other human beings' rights away? Why don't you practice on yourself what it is you believe in? Why don't you become the person first that you are supposedly needing to be before you point your fingers at others? Also, very much a thing that the Bible said. I think Jesus said it himself. He was like, why are you concerned with somebody else's life when it is you that you need to be focused on? Like, listen, if Jesus existed, and I do believe he was a man that, spread a lot of intelligence back in the day, I really wish we could bring him back. If this so-called what was the apocalypse, whatever it may be, where he comes down on a chariot and the angels come down and give like retribution onto the world and mankind, I really, really would love to have that conversation with him. Like, let's make a podcast episode, Jesus, because we need to talk. There's a lot of shit we need to discuss, because this is not it's not done in love. And if it's not done in love, it's not pure. And you can take that however you will, but people have the right to exist outside of your belief. And when it comes to religious trauma, to go back to that, to end it with me so Ashley can get a word in, I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
I am healing it. I'm getting a better understanding of it, but that by no means is a free pass in my life to treat people however you want to treat them, just because they don't align with whatever it is that you believe in. You treat people with love, you treat people with respect. And if you can't do that, then that's a you issue. It's not an other people issue. And the longer you try to pass the blame, the more you distance yourself from source energy, from the universe, from God, whatever you believe in. And I have a lot of anger in me still. I feel it. I'm like burning on the inside, but I know that, like Ashley said, this is a reflection of people. It's not, for me now, I understand that it's not the God itself, it's people and how they portray things, and that they want to manipulate and control. But it needs to stop. And it starts with having these kinds of conversations by people who have been abused, neglected, oppressed for centuries in the name of God.
Mm.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. You have a lot of knowledge and wisdom, and you've studied a lot within different aspects of religion. And I'm sure that you have a lot more to say about the entire thing, because I mean, there is a lot of depiction. I mean, even just the fact that I haven't gone as deep as Nina has, and I think it's just amazing that she has, because it opens up an entire field of understanding something that has been around for majority of human evolution, essentially, And I mean, even when I came across videos talking about why Jesus is white with blue eyes, I thought, touche. Why? He's Middle Eastern, isn't he?
Yeah.
Why would he have blue eyes, and why would he be white? That was like, wow, yeah, I love that we're really just undoing the layers of something that I feel like has been so embedded in society in one version per se, that people have stuck to that one version and they don't question it. And not a fault either, because I know people don't question things, because finding out that your faith and something that you've held on to so dearly has different aspects to it that might be challenging your comfort zone within that. Like human psychology, that can really play a part in uncomfortability and fear. You're telling me that Jesus is not this, but I've been praying to this one version of him for so long. Like you're also working with human psychology when you have these conversations. And for survival mode, because I have seen so many videos, and I'm coming from the emotional psychology part of this. When I see people say things like, I give all my prayers and I give all my trauma to God, and it's this reliance and attachment that is no fault, right? But then I think if someone tries to take that away, what does that do psychologically to that person?
Yeah.
When someone, like with you coming out, Nina, and sharing your beautiful wisdom with anyone having conversations like this, you're not just challenging the person that has been in potentially this faith for such a long time, you're challenging their attachments around it.
Right. Yeah.
You're challenging their psychology, and that is absolutely fine, because we all have attachments one way or another, and when they get challenged, it disrupts our survival mode, our protective mode, challenges our emotional attachments by a threshold even, you know. So it's very, there's so, I was about to say there's so many layers to this. I'm so like used to saying that it's not funny. There is so many layers to this, but I totally agree with the accountability too, because I'm serious when I say this. The most judgmental people that I have met have called themselves Christian. I have never met anyone as judgmental as someone who has called themselves a Christian. Two things that I want to say. First thing is, this will end when humanity relinquishes control. But until humanity relinquishes control, human beings relinquish their control on things, this will not, especially because this gives people power. This gives people greed. This gives people things. And I saw it. Well, being in that church, I saw the man standing up on an altar and being seen as the lead, because he was the pastor, he was the leader of the church essentially. Looking back on it, the energy that gets projected at him is like godlike. That's my depiction of this. The depiction of this person standing at the altar, and just the way the congregation was acting towards him and the way people treat him. The uncomfortability for me was entirely there for many different experiences of that church, and many other churches. And the other thing too is I went to other churches. I tried others as well. May I just say this? When I left, that wasn't just it. I actually tried other places, because I had friends that are Christian at that time. And they were like, try this church, try that church, don't give up on it. And I thought, fine, I won't give up on it. I'll see what happens. I was absolutely, sorry, my teenage self was very traumatized within this. But having people around you that identify with Christianity, it's very difficult to, especially as a people pleaser, it's very difficult to navigate, and not knowing who you are and not knowing where to go. It's very difficult to find another pathway or even to see that. So I went to other churches. Oh my geez. And there was another particular one that I remember going to, and oh my jaws, just the feeling, the stares that you get, the uncomfortability, like, oh. And then there was another one that I went to that wasn't too far from the first one, and they were so welcoming to whoever walked through their doors. But there were disagreements from the people around me of their beliefs, because they were like, we accept people that are gay, lesbian, bi, we accept LGBT. I don't think back then that it was LGBTQIA though. I think it was just LGBT. I think, don't quote me. But they were very accepting and open to whoever walked through their door. That was the first time I'd ever experienced a different side to what I've known it as the Old Testament of Christianity. My experience from, I guess, the first church was Old Testament. So a lot of the views that were even around me that I think related strictly to Old Testament views. So be going to a church that showed a completely different side to this was such an eye-opening experience. Truly, a lot of the things that I have learned have come from the physical side of seeing this and experiencing it, honestly.
Mhm.
um, but yeah, I was going to say something before. It's interesting too, and like I said, with the physical side of things, hearing how different people reference their version of Christianity, and they'll say that it comes back into one. But the other thing that makes it different is you as the human being, because every human being is so different. So you as an individual is going to absorb and project Christianity through your own psychology, like I've been talking about. And it's sucky because some that I've come across as well, the views on mental health and the connection with that equal to possession in their words,
Mhm.
like I spoke about at the start, and the conversations that they have around it are just connected to that one pathway for them. So
Yeah.
then if you have people that come into your congregation who are dealing with all kinds of different versions of mental health or trauma, life experiences, it's my worries of how that is interpreted and how it is treated. My experience was a few years ago, but that one experience is not an isolated incident. It continued after the church experience of knowing people that identified as Christian and their views on, my life. There's so much freedom to express the disbelief or the opinion of someone else's life in a certain fear mongering, controlling, um, high authority kind of way. That's what I found too, is the conversation on your life. It's in this high authority stance.
Mhm.
It's in this it's like I'm talking about. It's like because I believe in this, it's almost like a godlike energy, an ego
Yeah.
when referencing what you're doing in your life and what you're experiencing and what you believe.
Mhm.
It's so wrong. It's so wrong that you have no idea what you're about to do to yourself. Condemn yourself to hell,
Mm.
basically. You're
Yeah.
condemning yourself to hell. It's the it's the continued fear push. That's all I
Yeah.
feel like it kind of is as well as control. Like you said, it's this fear makes people submissive to the things that you want them to submit to. Is that the right word? Submiss.
It's,
It doesn't feel
it's
like it.
I don't know. I don't know what the word is though.
Submiss. It
Submit.
doesn't feel
That's it.
submit.
Submit.
Oh my jeez. Oh my god. Fear is used fear is a good way to have people submit to what you want them to submit to, essentially. It's a good way to have people form in line and conform to the kind of environment that you are demanding for it to be. If you
Yeah.
open up a congregation and you want that congregation to be this one pathway, all you have to do is work around people's psychologies, fear,
Yeah.
survival, like you said, vulnerability. Using those certain things will get people down your pathway and will have them sitting in that congregation listening to every word you say and acting like it's the gospel. Human beings know this stuff. When I spoke about in another episode the capability of human beings, some out there, without even fully knowing it, can truly manipulate a situation, can truly use your own vulnerability. It's not even vulnerability, it's just human, in my opinion. It's human to be fearful. It's human to be nervous, to be anxious, to have after effects from what you've gone through. But there are people out there that, like Nina was saying, will use that and know how to use that without even fully knowing they're doing it to get you to follow in what they believe is right. There's no other pathway. This is right. And I saw that happen. I saw that unfold physically and observing it. I didn't even know that I was fully doing it back then, but in the version of me now, I know that looking back, it's a lot of control. And I said it, human beings love to control. And I know that's not everyone. It's not everyone. I don't like to control, but there are things that I do. where I do project that kind of behavior, there are moments I'll catch myself doing it, right? It's not a perfection model, but it is the reality. There are human beings that love the feeling of it, that crave to be in that space. And they use certain things like religion, because religion has always been the thing to go to when the worst of the worst was occurring. You just pray. They've been doing it throughout human evolution, turning to God, right? It's the survival of that. Human beings can take that and mold it into their own version for the benefit of self only. People are very capable of that. And like I said before, this element of care that is preached, that's not a care factor, it's just manipulation. People preach care and say, we just want to check up on you because we care about you. We just want you to conform to the pathway because it's a care. We don't want you to go to hell. You don't care about me. You just want another person in your congregation. You just want another person projecting your pathway out to the masses. You want another person speaking in the way that you want them to speak, doing it how you want to do it. A sheep following the herd kind of thing. Without any fault on that, but that is the depiction essentially. And if you speak on any other way, like you said, you were someone that questioned things, you were a child that questioned things. That is such a threat to people that do not want anyone to question the true essence of their behavior, the true essence of their personality, their true agenda for community.
Yeah.
Having someone question that is that's a break. That's a break in the circle of control and manipulation. Yeah. And there are a lot of people, not just within religion, in many different walks of life, that thrive off the circle of manipulation. 100%. It's just very interesting how human beings have unfolded for decades, and how religion has unfolded and how people depict that. And like I said, just the experiences of the suppression of it, from being told, how do I say this? From feeling the suppression of it and then being told that that's love. Being told that is what God would want. God would want you to relinquish all that you think you know and believe what I'm saying to you. And that's love. Sounds a bit like an abusive relationship, honestly. Truly. And I'm going to say this too, because Nina mentioned it as well. It's also God has forgiven me, so you have to forgive me. And I actually think I talked about this in the accountability and responsibility episode. I think it was my anger with people telling me over the years where they've inflicted something and they call themselves Christian. They've inflicted something and then they turn around and say, the art of forgiveness is the true Christian pathway. It is, you're very connected to God when you choose forgiveness. And it's like, forgiveness is a different thing to everyone, right? If someone chooses forgiveness for themselves, for the healing of self, that is that, right? That is their space, that is their choice. And that, for some people, works beautifully in their healing journey, yes. But using it to validate your ill will, to validate your misbehavior towards other human beings, to validate your inhumanity, because it is a leeway of validating you treating other human beings a certain way, that you can use that to get people to conform, to get people to disregard your behavior and your actions. So you are never held up the mirror for accountability, using Christianity to never hold yourself accountable. I swear the amount of people that tried that with me, and it worked. And I always felt like the problem, because I was made to be seen as the problem, because it's easier to put someone else in that space than it is to turn around and say, oh yeah, I did this, but I couldn't possibly though, because, I follow in the pathway of God. And, I think maybe it's just a case that, I made a mistake, but they have to forgive me. Like that's the law, that's the rule. Doesn't really work like that. No, it doesn't work like that, actually. You don't get to harm anyone and then walk away, really. Unfortunately, that does happen, but in realism, you don't get that. And I always, God, I had to really cope with the grief of feeling like I allowed people to do that. That I allowed people to convince me that I would be doing such a ill will on my own part by not forgiving them. And this is the thing too, I said it, but I never actually felt it. I never forgave them for the behaviors, you know, especially with the invalidation. And I'm going to say this last story before I wrap it up myself. But there was an experience back when I was 21 where I had come out of a mental health facility for a suicide attempt. And this was the first ever experience that people actually knew about. I've had multiple attempts in my life and no one knew about them. This was the only one that people knew about. And the aftermath of that was the biggest, oh gosh, the aftermath was something. But I'll talk about that in a different episode. But one particular experience of that aftermath was that someone who was in the Christian religion decided to make a comment that, think about how to tell this story. When I came out of the facility and I came home, I had a former friend stay with me, and this former friend was with me from night until the next day. That person's partner decided to make a statement that that former friend shouldn't have stayed with me because I could have murdered that former friend. I could have taken her life. You know, who knows what I would have done. I could have taken her life and then taken my own. Made certain comments depicting me as a murderer. And then when I found out, I was beyond heartbroken. For the first time that people find this out, this is the analogy that they come to. Nothing is ever safe. That's what it felt like. Nothing. No space is ever forgiving. No space is ever accepting. For someone to come to a conclusion that something that I wanted to, getting to that point in the first place, you know, and then having someone depict me out to be that, just to resemble me to a murder. I still am finding myself trying to wrap my head around it and find a space of peace with it. Really, it's difficult. It's difficult with not even just that, but how the aftermath unfolded from that. When I explained my hurt, when I expressed my hurt for what was said, I was completely shut down. I was invalidated. That person's comments were justified by the people who that they had said it to. Justified. And again, I felt so alone. I felt so alone. And again, not heard, you know. You think people are your friends. You think you know that connecting suicide as a murderous act towards anyone. That would definitely be for another episode, but a lot of my hurt comes from people who have identified themselves as Christian. For the judgment that they have projected and the thoughts and the beliefs and the things that they have said without awareness, without even bothering to be aware, without even bothering to look into it, without even bothering to have a conversation. This is just what it is and that's it. Because to that person that made these comments, this is what it was. The depiction of suicide to them was just that. and the possibilities that what I could have possibly done, that was their mindset towards it. Nothing was changing that. And I was seen as the problem. I should have forgiven that person. I should understand where they're coming from. That's what I was told. I should understand where they're coming from. I sit back and I know that a lot of people don't have awareness on suicidality and mental health and human in general, to be honest. A lot of people do not have that. Humanity doesn't have the awareness on human. I understand all of that, but the hurt, that will never be invalidated. There is nothing, there is no validation ever for anyone to have an experience like this, truly. No matter what you identify as, no matter what gender you are, nothing validates ever being the cause of someone's hurt and harm.
The thing is, too, with people who have experienced this, there's so many more. There's so many more people that you don't know have experienced oppression, suppression, abuse in these forms that have not been heard and that have been shunned out in a way into it not existing. But to anybody out there listening right now, who is in these spaces, who is Christian, who goes to church, who is a pastor, et cetera, et cetera. What I learned in my healing journey thus far is, like, in the past, you would have, all these thoughts that I had come up when it regarded Christianity was negative connotations, negative depictions. You would have churches back in the day validifying racism, women's segregation, women's oppression, et cetera, et cetera. We see it now with the LGBTQIA. And everybody has the right to believe whatever they want to believe in. But I will say this, something that I've learned on top of that is churches also contributed to a lot of the amazing changes in the world, like the freedom's rights movement with Black people. Those were churches that organized together. And so I will say this, to anybody listening to these stories, who knows people who have gone through extreme amounts of trauma, you have the capability of changing that environment. And it only starts when you stop idolizing English, idolizing people in power, whether that be your pastor, your congregation, whatever it may be. And the thing that I find so funny is that exactly in Christianity in and of itself, even in Catholicism, you're not supposed to idolize anybody above God, right? And yet you're idolizing people's opinions, people's as positions in the church. And the thing too is, as an outsider, as somebody who is vulnerable, as somebody who has gone through trauma, walking into a church can be the scariest thing. Is just like anything, because you're walking into a whole group of people who have one idea. They might differ here and there, of course. There's individuality even within the community, but when you come from trauma, when you are experiencing trauma in those spaces, that's why I said to Ashley as well, I commend her for like getting up and walking away, because it's such a powerful move to do. And the only way you can create change, the only way you can stop the quote unquote, but the ratification of Christianity, whatever, you see churches shutting down, all of this stuff, you have to really ask yourself, why? Why? It's not that people don't believe in God anymore. It's not that people don't believe in love and unity anymore. It's not that people have gotten so evil and convoluted. People have always been where they're at right now throughout civilizations and millennia. It's because people are tired of the manipulation. People are tired of the abuse, and I think when we go back to Jesus' times and the Bible, Jesus was there to bridge the gap between church and your connection to source, to God, to universe. Jesus was there to bridge that. He made it possible for you to have a connection in the Christian religion for you to have that connection between God and you without the church. Church was created after him. Yes, he did say you can make churches, but I don't think he ever meant for this to happen. And so, to any Christian out there, to any leader out there in that position that can listen to this without getting triggered, or even if you do get triggered, I think that's a good thing because it means there's something there that you can learn and grow upon. These
Mm.
are not isolated incidences. And there's a reason people are leaving the church, and there's a reason Christianity is quote unquote dying out and under attack. And you have the unique position to change that and to make it into what it was always supposed to be. So take up that responsibility and hold people accountable, because that is the
Mm.
only way things will ever change. You should never know a group of people and say, these are the most judgmental people on the world. That should never be a thing. And it's sad that it is. It's even sadder that people have lost
Mm.
their lives due to the abuse that happens in these communities. And it needs to stop. So, yeah.
Yep, 100%. I mean, conversion therapy,
Mm.
camps as well that have just, there's just so many stories out there. There's
Yeah.
so many. And anytime that there's harm, anything that creates harm, anything that feeds harm and continues harm, which is in many different fields, it's even in the mental health field, needs to be looked at, needs to be acknowledged, and needs to be worked on. Forward moving has to come with change and being able to see what needs to be changed in the first place. So, yeah. Thank you for coming to our TED Talk.
Thank you for sharing your story, Ashley. It's such a brave thing to share and open up about. And I really, really hope that this can sit with people, because it's important. Things need to change. So, yeah.
Definitely. Thank you,
Thank
my
you,
friend.
guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Ashley. Love you. You're amazing. And so are
Thank
you
you.
guys. So are you guys.
Amazing.
Auf Wiedersehen. Have a great day, weekend, whenever you're listening to this. And yeah, go team.
Go team.